All right. So, shall we start, Florence? Where are
Yes,
you? I lost you. Here, there you are.
I'm here.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Like, this is amazing. And we're super excited to talk about this topic today. So, most of you probably know Florence Williams. Florence is the author of one of the really important books for forest therapy guides called The Nature Fix. And actually, yeah, that's one of the recommended books that we read, because Florence is a research author, so she does research, but then she writes really cool books. And she's written other books, and I had the pleasure and the honor to meet Florence in person during an immersion in LA a few years ago, right? um
Yes, and that immersion was incredibly powerful and meaningful to me. And Manuela is just such a unique and special teacher, the kind of mentor who really makes you think differently. Yeah, I'm just so thrilled that we're together here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And so Florence, like I said, is also forest therapy guide. And yeah, I think she has inspired a lot of us. I mean, when I asked her to sign the book, The Nature Fix, during the immersion, I was like, it's a little dirty because like I was taking the book everywhere and it was just like full of dirt and leaves and stuff. And yeah, I remember you said like that's how it's supposed to be. Like you should take the book outside. So
Right.
yeah. Anyway, so yeah, like I was sharing, so my name is Manuela. I'm also a forest therapy guide, but I also do other practices like sound healing and breath work. And I recently moved to Italy. I was looking for a more simple life, and I found that in this very small town near Otranto, in the very southern tip of Puglia. And yeah, somehow life, like time moves differently here. I don't know what it is, but it's really interesting. And yeah, I'm like really taking some time to get to know this place, to get to know the landscape, the sea, the trees, the shrubs. So it has been a really interesting process because I think it's the first time that I moved away from a place, like I moved to a place that I didn't know at all. So, and creativity has been like a really important piece of it. So yeah, Florence and I are going to work together in June. We're doing a retreat together, and the topic is nature as muse. Like kind of combining in conversation. We were like, we kind of thought about this topic. It just like came as the topic we wanted to work with. So we thought we were gonna offer like a talk, like some information on how creativity and nature are related. What does nature does with the creativity? So since Florence knows a lot about the science piece, I'm like, you take that part because you're way better than I am. So Florence, I'm like, I really want to hear a little bit from you about the research about nature and creativity. What does nature exactly do to our creative brain, and how does nature impact our creativity, and why?
Yeah, thank you so much, Manuela, and thanks for inviting me to do this talk. Nature and creativity is actually one of my favorite kind of subtopics in the nature and health space. I think that creativity, first of all, is just so linked to other aspects of kind of our mental health, the way we see the world, the way our own nervous system kind of moves through the world. And I also just know from talking to people that many of us feel like we don't access our creative selves enough. Modern life kind of separates us sometimes from our creative brains. And one of the amazing things about nature is how it just naturally kind of pulls us back into a mental state where we're more expansive and more creative. And so there are sort of like three big buckets for the mechanisms, really, for why that work in terms of our physiology, and our brains and our brain capacity. So I wanted to talk about some of those pathways just briefly. And the pathways are sort of roughly blood flow, and then their attentional networks. And then the final one is sort of how we process sensory information. So, in terms of our blood flow, I actually got into this topic because I met a cognitive neuroscientist, and I read one of his studies, and what he found was that after a 3-day backpacking trip, people improved 50% on this kind of standard measure of creativity. And he's the one who went on to really popularize the idea of the 3-day effect, which is something I talk about a lot in the Nature Fix. His name's Dr. David Strayer. And what he found eventually, after sort of spending a lot of time neuroimaging, and taking pictures of people's brainwaves and measuring people's brainwaves, is that it seemed like there's blood flow in our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain and our task-oriented brain. This is the part of the brain that I sit in all day. Most of us do. It's where we're focused on tasks, right? And we're sort of directing our attention to sort of one thing at a time. We live in that part of our brain kind of all day. He found that when we're in nature for a few days, that part of our brain starts dialing down. There's less blood flow in that part of the brain, specifically in theta waves in our midline prefrontal cortex. And so the question for him and other neuroscientists has been, well, if there's less blood flow there, where's the blood flow going instead? And it seems to be going to parts of our brains that are sometimes not so busy being connected. For example, our sensory and motor skill areas of our brains. So, what he told me that he noticed after being outside for 3 days is that he started to really hear the birds, in a different way. He started to kind of pay attention to the light. He started smelling things, that he wasn't smelling before, right? So our sensory brains kind of wake up. And when that happens, there's more connection. And of course, these connections in disparate parts of our brains, that's ultimately what drives creativity. It's what drives divergent thinking, which is kind of this expansive thinking where we're maybe solving problems or we're connecting things that hadn't been connected before. That seems to really lie at the center of creativity. Okay, so that's got kind of some of the blood flow piece. And it makes sense to me because, and he also finds this, that after we're gone for a few days and we come back to our work, we're sharper. And that's why the creativity tests are stronger. And that has to do with the fact that our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, and our attentional network is sort of like a muscle. And if we rest it, it makes sense that when we come back, it's actually like kind of ready to go. It's a little bit sharper. It's had a break. So I think that's really interesting. And most of us don't get that break, and we don't get that kind of relief very often. Okay, so then the next piece I wanted to talk about is sort of stress physiology. And there's been a lot of theory and research about this as well, showing that, for example, fear and creativity don't really live in the same space, and that our nervous system needs to get to a point of kind of comfort, needs to get to a more state where it's not on alert quite so much. Again, most of us, when we're in our prefrontal cortex, we're kind of in a yellow zone of stress. We are ready to confront whatever is coming at us. And we're kind of alert and to an extent even hyper alert. When we're in that state, it's hard to think expansively. And I like to think of this kind of as a spotlight metaphor, that many of us, we go through life with our spotlight focused on one thing at a time, whether it's looking at this webinar that we're in right now, or it's answering our email, or it's trying to find a parking space, or it's figuring out what's for dinner. We're on this tight spotlight. And when we're creative and expansive and connecting to one another and connecting to community, we have this much bigger zone of awareness. And that's the space where creativity resides. So, I think the question for a lot of us is how do we cue ourselves to sort of get out of the spotlight and get into a more expansive creative zone? And of course, nature just does that kind of brilliantly. There are theorists from the University of Michigan, Rachel and Stephen Kaplan. They started this whole, sort of school of thought called attentional restoration theory. And it's the idea that when we're in nature, there's nothing that's commanding our direct attention. Instead, it's a softer fascination that we start to sort of pick up on. There's a butterfly that flits in front of us. There's, the breeze on our face. Our senses, again, start to kind of wake up as we enter this softer fascination zone. And that's a zone that just puts us more naturally into kind of a mind wandering state, but it's not the mind wandering state that's connected to our prefrontal cortex, where we're thinking about ourselves. We may be mind wandering often about, this conversation I just had with my boss, or something I regret, or this memory or trauma that keeps coming up. That's the kind of mind wandering that's not so helpful in terms of our creativity and our mental health. It's more the mind wandering where we are having sort of unbidden thoughts about connecting different things or about problem solving that are connected to our sensations and sometimes our motor skills. For example, walking through a forest, we know is really good for problem solving because we don't have that spotlight on one thing. And then finally, just this is related, the sensory architecture piece. And this is the idea, for example, when we look at fractal patterns, which are often found in nature, and they're often in coastlines, like where Manuela is, along this beautiful coastline in southern Italy. It's rocky. There are waves. There are ripples in the water. There are clouds that you can see, this kind of vast vista. All of these things tend to kind of launch us in to a more expansive space. And I know, Manuela, I mean, as someone who has led probably hundreds and hundreds of people in your forest bathing programs, I'd love to ask you how you have seen some of this creativity and expansiveness get expressed, in your participants. What do you notice when you're out there with a group?
Yeah, thank you, Florence. And, I also want to highlight the fact that usually when we hear the word creativity, we think about, ooh, I have to be an artist. I have to write, or I have to paint, or I have to, make music or something like that. But the creativity goes way beyond that, like you were sharing, right? It's just like expanding your kind of your perception or your perspective on certain things. So problem solving, thinking outside of the box, just seeing different or new like pathways kind of, right? So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's important. So yeah, I mean, when people are out in nature, it's just magical what happens, right? It's this it's almost like people getting back into this childlike playful way, where they start, maybe they start doing things that they haven't done in a long time, right? That they give themselves permission to, you know I don't know, one time we had this group where people started with mud. It was a very rainy day, so there was a lot of mud on the trail, and people started like painting faces on the trees with the mud, right? And oftentimes this creativity, like this just permission to not follow always the same path, comes like automatically. It comes organically. It's not like you have to force it, like you were saying. It's just like a process where people flow into that. So oftentimes when we share like activities that where people, kind of create something together, um there's a lot of things that happen in this process, right? It's not only like the individual creativity that that kind of gets awakened in a way, but it's also like this group process where, when people start creating things together or creating like something together, there's this additional results that come out of that, where it's like, ooh, okay, so I see it this way and that person sees this thing completely different, and this person was attracted to this rock, and it kind of expands our view of other people too. It's like it
Mm.
opens up our empathy and being tolerant to other kind of views that people hold, right? It bonds people in a really nice way, when they create something together, when they see. And being creative, it's funny that you were sharing, like, when people relax, when the nervous system relax, the creativity kind of awakens. And then I feel like the creativity makes people relax even more. Kind
Yes.
of when they start creating something, they get into this playful way, and then it's kind of like like kind of a snowball effect. So yeah, that's what I've noticed. Some of the things I've noticed a lot more.
I
Yeah.
remember Manuela once on our immersion training that we did actually in this beautiful arboretum outside of Los Angeles. One of the exercises you had us do was sort of go off and think about texture and bring something back. And people brought back the most amazing things. And I think, first of all, I'll just say, I think my attitude about this was a little bit like, um, maybe skeptical or something. It's like, here we are like bringing back little objects and, I just wasn't sure, what this was going to do for us. But people brought back the most amazing objects, and then we passed them around and we shared them, and then we arranged them in this kind of like pretty almost mandala kind of shape in the middle of the circle. And it was so beautiful. It was like just beautiful, surprising beauty, right? Because people found things that I had never noticed before and never looked at.
Right.
And it did. I just remember there was this instant kind of mood elevation and also a sort of optimism that comes in when you're just like interacting with beauty. And
Mhm.
I think that there's a very creative and playful piece of that. And it's just something we don't give ourselves permission to sort of slow down and do very much. And I wonder, if you have an example for yourself of maybe a time when you were able to tap into something like your intuition or an emotion that you were able to access through this kind of practice.
Yeah, so well, I have I mean, there's many situations in my life, like the example with the textures, like that's also kind of a very surprising thing to do, because oftentimes we see something and then we think, oh yeah, I already know what the texture of this leaf is going to be, right? And then you touch it and oftentimes it's like, what? This is not
Yeah.
possible, right? It's there's so many things that happen. It's not only like the surprise effect, but also like all these lessons that you learn when you do these things, because it's like, oh, you should never think that you know something until you actually, no, you should never assume things. So anyway, so I have like I was sharing with you a personal experience with nature and creativity that kind of surprised me and really supported me. How nature and my creativity really supported me during a really rough time. So I had this dog. I've had dogs all my life, but this dog was like, just the relationship with this dog was like on another level. Like we were really connected. And he died very young, and he died in a very tragic way. So he went through a very rough like cancer process where he suffered a lot. And so when he died, like my heart was completely broken. Like I was destroyed, like literally. Um and so I was going through this very heavy grief, and I had this, so that piece really surprised me because I had this really intense urge. It was not something I was thinking about, oh, I should go outside and do something. It was like an urge that was coming from a very different place. I don't even know what it was. It was an urge that I had to, every time I was outside, I had to create something. It was almost like automatically my hands were like picking up, elements in the forest, and I was arranging them in a certain way and creating mandalas or creating something. And it was almost like this sense of like calmness and some sort of like relief every time I was able to create something. It was almost like honoring my dog when I was doing this. But it happened on a very it didn't happen on a cognitive level. So that's what I want to say. So the creativity that nature was awakening in me, like this way of grieving by creating things outside, was helping me not only getting through the grief but also expressing it. It was like almost a way of expressing my grief and honoring my dog, and yeah, just sit with the emotion. I think that's another piece of it, right? The expression of whatever you're feeling in this moment. So yeah, that was really interesting. And 6 years later, I still do it. When I'm outside, the urge is not as strong anymore, and it's not like I have to do it every 5 steps like I did at the beginning. But I still do it when I'm outside. So yeah, it's been like a really nice way of processing.
So it's almost become a little bit of a ritual,
Mm.
which is another thing that I think so many of us are missing in modern life. We don't come together in group to mark milestones or acknowledge grief, as much as we could be tapping into, our sort of emotional body as opposed to our cognitive body, which we're good at being there. And I know there are a couple of people on this call who have been with me on some of my forest bathing exercises and retreats. And I know one of our sort of favorite and powerful exercises is we kind of do a gift exchange. And it was Manuela who taught me this practice, and I'm so grateful. Where we're told to sort of go into the forest and find a gift for our partner in the group. We divide into partners. And um, then we sort of present our gift from the forest to each other. And people just sometimes burst into tears. This has happened to me. I've burst into tears because, for example, one time someone gave me this sort of seed pod with an element of the seed pod sort of escaping from the pod, like shoot an offshoot. And I instantly recognized this as my daughter leaving home for college. And I hadn't started to grieve this. I hadn't started to process this, sort of huge life event of becoming an empty nester. And I just burst into tears and I couldn't stop crying. And it was like, oh, I actually really my body needs to start processing this, and I need to start pre-grieving it. And it was this like beautiful piece of sort of forest artwork, that enabled me to just feel my feelings, and so that's an example of the kind of things that we do.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like nature and the creativity, like the creative process also brings up stuff that you're not even aware of, right? Oftentimes it's again, it's that expansive way of seeing things or perceiving things that oftentimes is triggered by nature and the creative mind. So yeah, it's a really interesting topic. So yeah, maybe we can share a little bit about like different ways of how to tap into that nature as muse, like how to, tap into that creativity when outside. What are some practices that we can do, or that we're gonna do, um yeah, when we're in nature. So do you want to start, Florence?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited. Manuela has invited me to help lead a retreat with her in southern Italy, and we're calling it the Nature as Muse retreat. And we're really focusing on creativity for this one and sensory kind of awareness and opening our senses as a pathway to creativity. And we're not just doing this through nature. We'll be doing it through food, which I'm excited about, and through dance and music, through sound. So we'd love to take questions from you about anything, about the retreat or about anything else related to this topic. If you want to put comments in the chat or questions, that would be great. But we've had a lot of fun putting together the itinerary and the sort of curriculum, I would say, for this retreat in Italy. And it's near where Manuela now lives in southern Italy, in Puglia, around Salento. And it's June 8th through 13th. Um, we are going to be staying at a historic old hotel. I think there's an Italian word for this kind of hotel. I want to think
Masseria.
auberge, but what is
Masseria.
it? Yeah.
Masseria. It's a masseria, yeah.
So that's going to be amazing. And one of the things that I am curious about doing, because I have less experience with this, is working with the music of the region. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Manuela?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was another really interesting process I had when I came here in June. So this region has a very ancient history and a lot of influence from Greece and like Turkey and like different areas. So there's this ancient music and dance called pizzica, and it's a very simple dance, but it has a very steady, strong rhythm with a tambourine. So it's usually played live in and people dance to it, like usually barefoot in this town squares. And when I first experienced this dance and this music, it was like really impactful for me because I had never heard it, I had never experienced it, but there was something again like really visceral that was changing inside of me. So again, like Florence was saying, like creativity, yes, through art, through music, through sensory awareness and all that, something shifts inside of you, something awakens. You can see or perceive your surrounding in a different way. So I don't know, there was something really powerful, like a very deep remembering when I experienced this music and this dance for the first time. And yeah, after that I learned that this music, like many 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 years back, was used as a ritual, especially by women, to kind of empower themselves to, like come back, connect to themselves, connect to nature as well through the music, through the tambourine. So yeah, that was a really interesting, also kind of creative process. Also kind of moving your body in a free way. It's also like that creativity, right? Where it's like you don't have to do certain steps in a certain way. You just have to kind of tap into the music and let your kind of your rhythm feel whatever feels right. And that's also part of the creativity because you're getting out of your thinking mind and you're just tapping into that expansive way of seeing things or perceiving things.
And I think there's something about the music too that is literally resonant, in terms of the vibration that we know has some kind of relationship to our vagus nerve that helps regulate our nervous system. And we have a question I see in the chat, maybe related to sort of vibration and inner power spots, which is, will you also visit so-called power spots in nature, like energetic hotspots or other certain places? Um, so, Manuela has experienced some of these beautiful nature spots in southern Italy. So why don't you take that one too?
Yeah, sure. So there are some really interesting places here, like very old dolmens, and that nowadays people don't are not really sure what they were used for, but it's impressive because it's like these like huge boulders, like, and they're usually put in a way where it kind of forms like a cave underneath. Some think they were used as like sacrifice, like ritual table. I don't know. It's like, and when you visit these places, usually they were built on nature places that were considered by the ancient population as sacred. So when you go there, you can kind of feel the power of it. But it's really interesting. One of the things I noticed when I came here for the first time in June, the second day I went for a hike, because that's what I always do when I go to somewhere new. The first thing I do is like, I have to get to know this place. So I went for a hike, and the second day and the third day I went for a dive. So I was like getting to know the place from the land and from the sea. So there's something really there, this place is really ancient. It's like a really ancient land, and it holds like a lot of power, and I don't really know how to explain it in words. It just feels that way. And I felt that when I went for the hike. And the interesting thing, a few months ago, a friend came to visit, and she said the exact same thing. I didn't say anything to her, and she said, like, wow, this land feels very ancient, like really powerful, like really, really strongly
Hmm.
wise. Like, that's what she said, and so I feel like also being near the sea and tapping into that kind of blue mind effect. Have you heard about that? I'm sure you have, Florence, right? There's a whole book about the blue mind. Just being near water and the effect of water on humans, and how that also kind of calms the nervous system, and I'm sure it's also related to creativity. I mean, I can spend hours just sitting on a rock watching the waves. It's just like literally I get like mesmerized, right?
And we'll also be doing some wild swimming, which
Right.
I'm really looking forward to. It's a gentle sea there, but it's incredibly beautiful. And that's of course a real shortcut to sort of sensory awakening is
Right.
full body immersion in cold water. But we'll also be looking at sacred spots that are cultural. For example, there are these very, very old cathedrals, and we are going to poke our heads into some of those where there are beautiful, beautiful mosaics, right? So
Right.
that's also a traditional art form in this culture, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, that's like kind of the artistic creativity, right? It's like there's this amazing art, um, yeah, very ancient art. It's like just everywhere. It's mind-blowing. So it's really cool to see like the nature art, like, like the how nature creates all these beautiful places, creativity and all that, and then, seeing all the man-made kind of creative places here as well, art. So yeah.
I want to be respectful of people's times. I know it's a Zoom call and we'd probably all rather be outside, but happy to take a couple more questions if you all have some. Can
I'm
either, yeah,
I'm just speaking right up, not waiting.
good, go for it.
So nice to meet you, Florence. And thanks, Manuela, for hosting Corinne and Matt here. So my question is, I approach this topic of creativity more from like an innovation and problem solving lens. Um, I do some work in some spaces that I just am very challenged in ways that provoke really out of the box thinking to solve complex problems. Does creativity just happen as the result of this process, or do you get into some exercises that help expand different areas? I don't even know what the categories of creativity might be, but I know you've referenced like artistic creativity and other forms. Can you talk about that at all with regard to the
Yeah, I
output?
can. I mean, there are two, the way I've learned it is there are two sort of basic types of creativity. One is convergent and one is divergent. And with a convergent, it's a kind of problem solving where there's one answer. For example, in a word, sort of well-known psychological word test, you'll be given a set of three words, and you have to find the fourth word that links all of them together. This is kind of like the New York Times connections puzzle. There's sort of one answer, but sometimes we need to have an aha moment to solve it. And so that is the type of creativity that was found to increase 50% after the 3 days in nature. So we have more aha moments when we've rested our prefrontal cortex. And then we come back. The other type is divergent thinking. And that's where there's lots of possible answers. And we need to look kind of, again, spread that spotlight really expansively to find sort of different and fresh ways of solving a problem. And a classic psychology test for that is, for example, you'll be shown a picture of a paperclip and how many uses can you find for that paperclip? And it could be everything from pulling out nails to picking your teeth, to using it as a clay tool. I mean, whatever. There you can come up with like hundreds of answers for the way you've never thought of. And divergent thinking is also found to increase after time in nature. Again, there's not like a specific exercise. It's more that you are putting yourself into a state, like a nervous system state, a mental state, kind of a more optimistic state sometimes that we find in nature. And these all just automatically and sort of intuitively turn on this kind of thinking in our brain. Also, I will just say that there are tests showing that people who go for a walk around the block, even if there are some trees, and then take an IQ test, they actually improve their IQ scores after a walk around the block. So, it's like it's weird how just even a micro break can help turn on creativity, which is why it's so important if you are in a job where you have to think really creatively, taking those micro breaks in nature is also really important.
Thank you.
There's another question, Florence. Are there also known studies available about increasing creativity with people who suffered a stroke or other brain damage?
Yeah, I am familiar with a study that occurred in a horticulture therapy program for stroke patients. It was in Sweden near Alnarp, and what they found was that different neural connections happened more quickly when the therapy took place in nature. And they thought the mechanism for that was having more sensory awareness and integration. So in the garden, you're not just learning the names again if you've lost language, you're not just learning the names again for the apple or the leaf or the acorn, but you're actually able to smell the apple, you're able to taste the apple, you're able to feel the apple. And that accelerates those neuronal connections that have been lost, which makes a lot of sense.
Florence, I've got a question. Danny Summers, I'm in
Hi,
Atlanta,
Danny.
Georgia. Our first connection with Florence was in 2020, and it actually occurred officially in 21 when she was our keynote speaker. I represent a lot of garden centers across the US and a few in Canada. And as you can imagine, gardening and nature, all of this, well, Florence just told us the why. We saw a huge outpouring of people going to their gardens during COVID, and the Nature Fix really showed us why it happened. And it's been our roadmap for our garden centers to say, why be in your garden? It continues. I mean, you see her book right here to my shoulder here. It's on my shelf ever since 2021. Um, any follow-up book coming, Florence, or any updates to Nature Fix? Just a little question about what's the next series of chapters on this?
Thank you so much, Danny, for asking. And actually, maybe this would be a good sort of last question to go out on. And I also I see a question in the chat about the name of that researcher. Um, you can all contact me and contact Manuela through our various portals online. And on my site, it's just florencewilliams.com. And I have a contact, portal through there. So contact me and I'll tell you the name of that researcher. It's not on the tip of my tongue, but I can find it. I am working on a new book, and it's actually about the power and science of retreats. So, how getting out of our lives, our normal lives for a few days, can really trigger shifts and change and transformation, self-transformation. And actually, I would like to ask all of you if you have ever had a transformational life experience. Um, that occurred through going on a hike or a backpacking trip or a spiritual retreat, a meditation retreat. I would love to hear from you because I'm just doing lots of interviews and taking anecdotes. Pilgrimages are really famous for this. And it's one of the reasons I love leading retreats is that I see transformation happen in our participants. I often work with women who are going through breakups or divorces or other kinds of losses and see really, really powerful transformation that can occur after just, again, these 3 or 4 days outside. And it's really why I love doing the work that I do. So that's my way of answering your question, Danny, and also sending it back as a question for all of you. And please feel free to reach out through my website if you have an experience to share. Oh, here's someone who had a transformational experience with Manuela. Yes, I believe it. I believe it. I think, it's been just wonderful to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about our work. And just so grateful, Manuela, for putting this together and for inviting me to join you for this. It's great to see some faces out there.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this program too. And yeah, just working with you. And I know we're gonna have a lot of fun. And I think that's also really important about, hosting retreats. It doesn't have to be all about like hard spiritual work. The fun part is also part of it. And the fun and the laughter can also just open up a lot of, like transformation in people. Because, yeah, oftentimes we take life way too serious. And having that space where you can just relax and have fun and just, be is also really important to to tap into that transformation and change of perspective in people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the time together. And yeah, we're definitely going to send out the recording. And maybe, Florence, what about if we if you're interested in like life changing, because you're interviewing people for your book, maybe we can include like a short questionnaire, and people who want to complete it, they can complete it, and that way you get the information for your book. How about that?
That sounds wonderful. And here's just a final question. Where can people find out more about the retreat?
Yes, so we will send all the information out tomorrow as well. So the recording, information about retreats, questionnaire, and whatever else comes to our mind.
And
that
what's the name of your website about the retreat?
Retreat Salento. So I can put it in the chat real quick.
And feel free to reach out, with any questions you might have.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, we're really happy and super grateful that you joined us for this call. And yeah, hope to see you very soon. Maybe we can do some other call on another topic. How about that?
Yeah, this is really nice to see all your happy faces out there. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, morning.
Hope you can get outside today, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Gracias.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, Deborah. Hi, Deborah.